The chair next to me was empty, and my wife was laughing about it. I sat alone at the defendant's table in Courtroom 4B of the Westbrook County Family Court, wearing the same navy blazer I'd bought at Kohl's for my grandmother's funeral 7 years ago. The fabric was tight around my shoulders now. I'd gained muscle working at the shop, the kind of muscle you get from lifting transmissions and pushing cars onto lifts for 14 years. Vanessa sat across the aisle, maybe 12 feet away, but it felt like she was on another planet. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit I'd never seen before. Her hair was freshly highlighted. Her nails were painted the exact shade of red that always meant she was feeling powerful. Next to her sat Julian Mercer, one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the county. I knew his hourly rate because Vanessa had mentioned it at dinner once, back when we still had dinners. "Julian charges $800 an hour," she'd said casually, the way someone might mention the weather. "He destroys people." Now Julian was leaning back in his chair, whispering something to Vanessa. She covered her mouth and laughed, a soft, cruel laugh. The kind of laugh you'd hear at a country club when someone told a story about a waiter who'd spilled wine. They were laughing at the empty chair. Judge Patricia Holloway looked up from her paperwork and frowned. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and reading glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had the kind of face that said she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice flat, "I see you're still representing yourself, is that correct?" I stood up, my knees felt stiff. "Yes, Your Honor." Julian Mercer made a sound, not quite a laugh, more like a huff of air through his nose, the kind of sound that said, "This is going to be easy." Vanessa turned to look at me. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement. She raised her voice just enough to make sure the court reporter caught every word. "Your Honor, with all due respect, we've been waiting for nearly 40 minutes. My husband doesn't have legal representation because he can't afford it. He's just a mechanic." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. "He works on cars, that's all he's ever done. Can we please just proceed so the court's time isn't wasted any further?" I didn't respond. I checked my watch instead. An old Timex with a scratched face. My father had given it to me when I turned 18, right before he disappeared from my life. 8:47 a.m. He was late. But my father had always been late. It was one of the things I'd learned to accept about him, back before I'd stopped accepting anything about him at all. Julian Mercer stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. He was tall and thin, with grey hair swept back from his forehead and a tan that suggested expensive vacations. "Your Honor, given the defendant's lack of legal counsel and his apparent inability to mount any meaningful defense, we respectfully request that the court proceed with a default judgment. Mrs. Bennett is seeking full custody of the minor children, sole ownership of the marital home, and spousal support in the amount of $7,000 per month. Given Mr. Bennett's clear..." "Inability?" I said. I hadn't meant to interrupt. The word just came out. Julian paused, looking at me like I was a child who'd spoken out of turn. "I'm sorry," he said smoothly. "Did you have something to add, Mr. Bennett?" I did. I had a lot to add. But I also knew that anything I said right now would sound desperate. And desperate men lose in family court. That was something my father had told me years ago, before the phone calls stopped and the letters came back unopened. "No," I said. "Please continue." Julian smiled. It was the smile of a man who was about to win. "As I was saying, Your Honor, Mr. Bennett has demonstrated a pattern of financial instability, emotional volatility, and general unsuitability as a custodial parent. We have documentation showing..." The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Not opened, swung. The kind of motion that makes everyone turn around, even people who are pretending not to care. A man walked in. He was tall, maybe 6'2". He wore a charcoal grey suit that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His silver hair was cut short, almost military style, and his jaw was set in a way that made him look like he was walking into a battle he already knew he'd won. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand, a single briefcase, nothing else. I knew that walk. I'd spent 18 years of my life watching that walk, and then another 23 years trying to forget it. My father crossed the courtroom in 6 long strides. He didn't look at Vanessa. He didn't look at Julian. He didn't even look at the judge. He walked straight to the empty chair next to me, set his briefcase on the table, and sat down. "My apologies for the delay, Your Honor," he said. His voice was deep and steady, the kind of voice that commanded attention without raising itself. Traffic on the interstate, some things never change. Judge Holloway looked at him over her reading glasses. "And you are?" "Thomas Blackwood." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, sliding it across the table toward the bailiff. "Licensed to practice in this state, Your Honor, bar number 847291. I'm entering my appearance on behalf of the defendant, Mark Bennett." He paused. "I'm also his father." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I looked at Vanessa. Her face had gone white, not pale. White. The kind of white that happens when all the blood drains from your head at once. Julian Mercer was staring at my father like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had. "Thomas Blackwood," Julian repeated slowly. You're the Thomas Blackwood, the federal prosecutor? The one who—" "Retired," my father said. 8 years now. But I kept my license active." He turned to look at Julian for the first time. "Hello, Julian. I heard you left the public defender's office. Private practice must be treating you well." Julian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I thought you were dead," he finally said. "Not yet." My father snapped open his briefcase. "Though I'm sure some people wish I was." He pulled out a thick manila folder and set it on the table with a thud that echoed through the silent courtroom. "Now," he said, "shall we discuss the actual facts of this case? Or would you prefer to continue wasting the court's time with character assassination?" I sat very still. I didn't trust myself to move. For 23 years I'd believed my father was a drunk who'd abandoned his family. For 23 years I'd believed the stories my mother had told me before she died. For 23 years I'd believed I was alone. And now he was sitting next to me, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck, pulling documents out of a briefcase like he was about to perform surgery. Judge Holloway leaned forward. "Mr. Blackwood, while I appreciate your dramatic entrance, I'm going to need more than a business card and a bar number. What exactly is your relationship to this case?" My father didn't hesitate. "Your Honor, I'm not just Mr. Bennett's attorney. I'm his father, and for reasons that will become clear in the next few minutes, I have a personal and professional interest in ensuring that this court has access to all relevant evidence before making any decisions." He opened the manila folder. "Let's start with the finances. The next 4 hours changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my wife, and the woman I'd spent 11 years trying to make happy. But before I tell you what my father revealed in that courtroom, I need to go back. I need to explain how I got here, how a mechanic from Westbrook ended up married to a woman who called him a nobody in open court, how I spent a decade believing I was the problem, when the truth was hiding in plain sight the whole time. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm 41 years old. I own a small auto repair shop called Bennett & Sons on the corner of Miller Road and Highway 12. The Sons part of the name was supposed to be aspirational. I always figured I'd have kids someday, and they'd work alongside me, learning the trade the way I'd learned it from my uncle. I never imagined my sons would be used as bargaining chips in a divorce, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I met Vanessa in 2012 at a charity fundraiser for the local children's hospital. I wasn't supposed to be there. My buddy Rick had 2 tickets because his wife was on the planning committee, but she'd come down with the flu and Rick didn't want to go alone. "Free food," he'd said. "Open bar. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen was meeting a beautiful woman who made me feel like the most important person in the room. Vanessa was 29 then, working as a real estate agent for a boutique firm that handled luxury properties. She was charming and confident, and she laughed at my jokes. She didn't seem to care that I had grease under my fingernails or that my suit was from JCPenney. She said she liked that I was real. We got married 14 months later. Small ceremony, 30 guests. Her family didn't come. She said they were complicated. I didn't push. Everyone's family is complicated. Our first son, Tyler, was born in 2014. Our second son, Ethan, came in 2016. For a while, things were good. Not perfect, but good. I worked 60 hours a week at the shop. Vanessa worked on her real estate business. We had dinner together most nights. We took the boys to the park on Sundays. We watched movies on Friday nights after the kids went to bed. I thought we were building something. The first crack appeared in 2019. Vanessa started going to the gym more often. Not unusual, lots of people get more health conscious in their 30s, but she wasn't going to the regular gym on Oak Street. She was driving 40 minutes to a boutique fitness studio on the other side of town, a place called Elite Performance. They have better equipment, she said when I asked about it. And better trainers, she added, not quite meeting my eyes. His name was Derek. I learned that later. Derek Simmons, 26 years old, six-pack abs, a smile that probably got him tips that were bigger than my weekly grocery bill. But I didn't know about Derek then. I just knew that something had shifted. Vanessa started coming home later. She started criticizing things she'd never noticed before. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the way I folded towels, the way I talked to the boys. "You're too soft with them," she said once, after I'd spent an hour helping Tyler with his homework. "They need discipline, not coddling." I tried harder. I always tried harder. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You try to be better. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March 2023. I'd had a long day at the shop. A customer's BMW had thrown a rod, and we'd spent 8 hours trying to source a replacement part. I came home at 7:30 p.m., exhausted, expecting to find Vanessa making dinner and the boys doing homework. Instead, I found the house empty, quiet, dark. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Mark, I'm taking the boys to my mother's for a few days. I need space to think. Please don't call. V." Her mother lived in Arizona. Her mother, who Vanessa hadn't spoken to in 3 years because of some argument about money. Her mother, whose phone number I didn't even have. I called Vanessa, voicemail. I texted, no response. I sent an email. Nothing. For 3 days I didn't know where my sons were. For 3 days I went to work and came home to an empty house and lay awake at night wondering what I'd done wrong. On the 4th day, I got served. The process server showed up at the shop around noon. Young guy, maybe 22, with acne and a nervous expression. He handed me an envelope and said, "You've been served, sir. Have a good day." Inside the envelope was a petition for divorce. Vanessa was seeking full custody of both children, exclusive use of the marital home and spousal support. The reason cited was irreconcilable differences. Attached to the petition was a temporary restraining order. I was not allowed within 500 feet of my own house. I was not allowed to contact Vanessa, except through her attorney. I was not allowed to see my sons without court supervision. I read the paperwork 3 times, standing in the parking lot of my own shop, while my employees watched through the window. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But I'd learned a long time ago that crying doesn't fix anything, so I folded the papers, put them in my pocket, and went back to work. That night I checked into a Motel 6 on the edge of town, $39 a night. The carpet had a stain that might have been coffee, or might have been something worse. The sheets smelled like industrial detergent. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I was tired. Tired of everything. But something made me pick up. "Mark." The voice was familiar but distant, like a song you heard once as a child. "It's your father." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "I know we haven't spoken in a long time," he continued. "I know you probably hate me, but I need you to listen. Your wife is not who you think she is, and if you don't let me help you, you're going to lose everything." I should have hung up. I should have told him to go to hell. For 23 years I'd believed he'd abandoned me. For 23 years I'd believed the story my mother had told, that Thomas Blackwood was a drunk, a gambler, a man who'd chosen his vices over his family. But something in his voice made me hesitate. A steadiness, a certainty. How did you get this number? I asked. I've had it for years, he said. I've been watching from a distance, waiting for the right time. The right time for what? To tell you the truth. And that's when my father started talking. And for the first time in my life, I started to understand that everything I believed about my past was a lie. My father wasn't a drunk. He wasn't a gambler. He was a federal prosecutor who'd spent 15 years putting some of the most dangerous people in America behind bars. In 1999, he'd been the lead prosecutor on a case against the Marchetti family, a criminal organization that had controlled drug trafficking in the Northeast for decades. The case had lasted 2 years. 3 witnesses had died before trial. My father had received death threats daily. The FBI had placed our family under protective surveillance. And when the trial ended, when Anthony Marchetti and his 3 sons were sentenced to life in prison, my father was given a choice. They told me I could stay, he said, his voice quiet over the phone. I could keep my family, keep my job, and hope that the Marchettis didn't have enough friends on the outside to follow through on their threats. Or I could leave, disappear. Let your mother tell everyone I was a deadbeat. Let you grow up thinking your father was a failure. Why would you choose that? I asked. Because if I stayed, they would have killed you, all of you. The FBI intercepted a plan. They were going to bomb our house while we slept. Your mother knew. She agreed that I should go. She didn't want to agree, but she understood. I sat in that motel room, listening to my father describe a life I'd never known existed. He'd spent the last 2 decades in various cities under various names, working as a legal consultant, never staying in one place too long. He'd watched me from afar. He'd seen me open my shop. He'd seen me get married. He'd seen my sons born. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because the Marchettis are gone. The last one died in prison 6 months ago. And because your wife is about to do something that will destroy you, and I'm the only one who can stop it. What do you mean? There was a pause on the line. Mark, your wife hasn't sold a house in 2 years, but she's been spending money like she's closing deals every month. Where do you think that money is coming from? I didn't answer. I didn't know. I do, my father said. I've been investigating her for 3 months, and what I found is enough to put her in prison. The next weeks were the strangest of my life. My father flew into town but stayed at a hotel under a different name. We met in parking lots, coffee shops, and once at a rest stop off the interstate. He brought documents. So many documents, bank statements, corporate filings, property records, text messages obtained through legal discovery, a forensic audit conducted by a firm he'd worked with during his prosecutor days. The picture that emerged was devastating. Vanessa had been living a double life. On paper, she was a struggling real estate agent whose income had dropped during the pandemic. She told me business was slow. She told me we needed to tighten our belts. She told me I should work more hours. In reality, she hadn't closed a single real estate transaction since 2021. Her license was technically active, but her broker had quietly let her go 18 months ago. She hadn't bothered to tell me, but the money had kept flowing. My father showed me the bank records. For 2 years, Vanessa had been making regular deposits into a joint account I didn't know existed. The deposits ranged from $5,000 to $20,000. They came from a company called V-Design LLC. V-Design LLC had no employees, no office, no clients, no products. It was a shell company, registered in Delaware, with a mailing address that turned out to be a UPS store. The money that flowed through V-Design came from one source: loans. My father spread the documents across the table of the coffee shop where we were meeting. His face was grim. She's been forging your signature, he said. Home equity lines of credit, personal loans, a small business loan supposedly for your shop except you never applied for it, and the money went straight to V-Design. I stared at the papers. My signature was there, at the bottom of loan applications I'd never seen. It looked like my handwriting. It was close enough to fool a bank. How much? I asked. My father hesitated. Total? Just over $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. Money borrowed in my name. Money I would be legally responsible for. Money that had vanished into a shell company controlled by my wife. Where did it go? I asked. My father pulled out another document, a lease agreement. Derek Simmons, he said, her personal trainer. They've been seeing each other for at least 2 years. She rented him an apartment downtown. $2,000 a month. She bought him a car, a new Audi A4. She's been paying his credit card bills. I looked at the lease, at Derek's name, at Vanessa's signature at the bottom. She's been using my money to support her affair. Yes, and she's trying to divorce me to cover her tracks. She's trying to divorce you before you find out. If she gets the house and spousal support, she can use that money to pay off the loans. You'll be left with the debt and no way to prove what happened. I sat back in my chair. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. I hadn't touched it. What do we do? My father smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of a man who had spent his career dismantling criminal empires. We wait, he said. We gather more evidence, we document everything. And when we walk into that courtroom, we don't just defend you, we destroy her. The next 2 months were a masterclass in patience. I went to work every day. I fixed cars. I talked to customers. I acted like a man who was barely holding it together, which wasn't hard because that's exactly what I was. But at night, I became someone else. I became an investigator. My father taught me how to document everything. Every email Vanessa sent, every text message, every phone call. I learned how to request bank statements under the pretense of organizing my finances for the divorce. I learned how to pull credit reports. I learned how to trace corporate registrations through public databases. I also hired a private investigator, not some guy from a strip mall. A former FBI agent my father knew, a woman named Sarah Chen, who charged $400 an hour and was worth every penny. Sarah got the video. It was security footage from the parking garage of Derek's apartment building. The building had cameras on every level, and the property management company kept the footage for 90 days. Sarah sweet-talked a security guard into giving her access. The video showed Vanessa and Derek standing next to a white Audi A4 having a conversation. The camera had audio. "When this is over," Vanessa said, "we'll have everything. The house, the money. He won't even be able to afford a lawyer." Derek laughed. "You really think it'll be that easy?" "He's a mechanic, Derek. He fixes cars. He doesn't know anything about money or law or how any of this works. By the time he figures out what's happening, it'll be too late." I watched that video 12 times. Each time I felt something inside me grow colder, harder. She didn't just betray me. She planned it. She thought I was too stupid to fight back. She was wrong. The hearing was scheduled for June 15th, a preliminary hearing to determine temporary custody and support arrangements. Vanessa's lawyer had pushed for an early date, probably hoping to catch me off guard. My father and I had prepared for weeks. We had binders full of evidence, bank statements, corporate records, the forensic audit, the video footage, a sworn statement from Sarah Chen, a letter from the bank confirming that my signature on the loan documents didn't match my actual signature on file, but we decided not to show our hand, not right away. My father told me to arrive at the courthouse alone, to sit at the defendant's table without an attorney, to let Vanessa and Julian Mercer think they'd already won. "Let them get comfortable," he said. "Let them make their speeches. Let them mock you, and then I'll walk in." "Why the drama?" My father's eyes went cold. "Because I want her to know what it feels like, to be confident, to think you're in control, and then to watch it all fall apart in front of witnesses." So that's what we did. I arrived at the courthouse at 7:45 a.m., wearing my J.C. Penney suit, carrying nothing but a yellow legal pad I'd bought at Office Depot. I sat at the defendant's table and waited. Vanessa arrived at 8:09, looking like she was walking into a photo shoot. Julian Mercer was right behind her, radiating confidence. They saw the empty chair next to me. They smiled. For 45 minutes, they smiled. And then my father walked through those doors. Back in the courtroom, Judge Holloway was studying my father's documents with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to concern. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "these are serious allegations. You're claiming that Mrs. Bennett committed bank fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of marital assets?" "I'm not claiming anything, Your Honor." My father's voice was steady. The documents speak for themselves. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase and handed them to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. What you have in front of you is a forensic audit conducted by Harrington Financial Services. They specialize in identifying fraud in divorce proceedings. What they found is that over the past 24 months, Mrs. Bennett has obtained 6 separate loans totaling $212,000. All of these loans were obtained using documentation that included what appears to be my client's signature. He paused. My client did not sign those documents. A handwriting expert has analyzed the signatures and concluded that they are forgeries. Vanessa's face had gone from white to gray. She was gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Julian Mercer stood up. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Mr. Blackwood is making wild accusations without any— I have the expert's report right here, my father interrupted calmly. Would you like me to enter it into evidence? Judge Holloway held up her hand. One moment, Mr. Mercer. She looked at my father. Continue, Mr. Blackwood. My father nodded. The money from these fraudulent loans was deposited into a shell company called V-Design LLC. This company has no legitimate business operations. It was created solely to move money without detection. The funds were then used to pay rent on an apartment at 442 Madison Avenue, Unit 12B. The lease is in the name of Derek Simmons. He handed another document to the bailiff. Mr. Simmons is Mrs. Bennett's personal trainer. He is also her romantic partner. They have been conducting an affair for approximately 2 years. During that time, Mrs. Bennett has used money obtained through fraud to pay his rent, his car payment, and his credit card bills. Julian Mercer was no longer sitting down. He was standing, his face flushed, his hands clenched. Your Honor, I object. This is— Mr. Mercer, you will sit down. Judge Holloway's voice was ice. You will not speak again until I give you permission. Julian sat. My father continued as if nothing had happened. Your Honor, I'd like to enter one final piece of evidence, a video recording obtained from the security system of Mr. Simmons' apartment building. He pulled a laptop from his briefcase, opened it, and turned it to face the judge. This recording was made 3 weeks ago. It shows Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Simmons discussing their plans for the divorce. He pressed play. The courtroom was silent as Vanessa's voice filled the room. When this is over, we'll have everything. The house, the money. He won't even be able to afford a lawyer. Derek's laugh echoed off the walls. You really think it'll be that easy? He's a mechanic, Derek. He fixes cars. He doesn't know anything about money or law or how any of this works. By the time he figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. My father paused the video. I looked at Vanessa. She was crying now. Not the delicate, graceful tears she'd perfected over years of manipulation. These were ugly tears, the kind that leave your face blotchy and your mascara running in streaks. Your Honor, Julian Mercer said weakly, I need a moment to confer with my client. No, Judge Holloway's voice was flat. You've had plenty of time to confer. What you haven't had is any interest in the truth. Mr. Blackwood, do you have anything else? My father closed his laptop. Just one more thing, Your Honor. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a final document. This is a report from the State Real Estate Licensing Board. It confirms that Mrs. Bennett's real estate license, while technically active, has not been associated with any sales transactions since September 2021. She has not earned any legitimate income in almost 2 years. He set the document on the table. Everything Mrs. Bennett has acquired during that time, she acquired through fraud. The money she's been spending is not hers. It's my client's, and the loans she's taken out, loans my client will be legally responsible for unless this court acts, were obtained through forgery and deception. He straightened his jacket. Mr. Bennett is not a wealthy man. He's a mechanic. He works with his hands. He built a small business from nothing. He provided for his family. He was a good husband and a good father. And his reward for all of that was to be robbed, betrayed, and mocked in open court. He looked directly at Vanessa. Mrs. Bennett called my client a nobody. She said he was just a mechanic. She said he didn't know anything about money or law. He smiled. It was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. She was wrong. The silence that followed lasted maybe 5 seconds. It felt like an hour. Then Julian Mercer did something I hadn't expected. He stood up, gathered his papers, and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm withdrawing as counsel for Mrs. Bennet." Vanessa's head snapped toward him. "What? Julian, you can't—" "I can, and I am." Julian's voice was strained. "I was retained under the assumption that this was a straightforward divorce case. What I've just witnessed suggests that my client has been using funds obtained through criminal activity to pay my fees. I cannot in good conscience continue to represent her. My professional ethics require me to withdraw immediately." He didn't look at Vanessa. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the back of the courtroom, pushed through the doors, and was gone. Vanessa was standing now, her hands shaking. "Mark," she said. "Mark, please, this isn't what it looks like. I can explain. I was trying to protect our family. Derek doesn't mean anything. I was just—" "Mrs. Bennet." Judge Holloway's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "You will be silent." Vanessa sat down. Her shoulders were shaking. The judge looked at my father, then at me, then at the pile of documents on her bench. "I've seen a lot of things in 30 years on the bench," she said, "but I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this." She removed her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "Based on the evidence presented today, I am making the following rulings, effective immediately." She picked up a pen. "First, the temporary restraining order against Mr. Bennet is hereby vacated. He is free to return to the marital home." Vanessa made a sound, a small strangled sound. "Second, temporary custody of the minor children is hereby granted to Mr. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet will be permitted supervised visitation pending further investigation." I felt something in my chest, not relief, not yet. Something else, something I couldn't name. "Third, Mrs. Bennet is ordered to vacate the marital home within 2 hours of the conclusion of this hearing. She may take personal belongings only. All other assets are hereby frozen pending forensic examination." The judge paused. "Fourth, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. The evidence suggests that Mrs. Bennet may have committed multiple felonies, including fraud, forgery, and theft. That is not a determination I can make in family court, but I will ensure that the appropriate authorities have access to all relevant documents." She set down her pen. "Finally, I want to say something directly to Mr. Bennet." I looked up. "You were mocked in this courtroom today. You were called a nobody. You were told that you didn't understand money or law or how any of this works." She gestured at my father. "I think the evidence suggests otherwise." She gathered her papers. "We're adjourned." The walk out of the courthouse felt like walking through a dream. My father was beside me, carrying his briefcase, saying nothing. Vanessa was somewhere behind us, still crying, being escorted by a bailiff who was explaining that she had 2 hours to collect her belongings. When we reached the parking lot, my father stopped. "Mark," I turned to face him. "I know I wasn't there," he said. His voice was different now, softer, less like a prosecutor and more like a man who was tired. "I know you grew up thinking I'd abandoned you. I know your mother told you things that weren't true. I don't blame her for that. She was scared. We were both scared." He put his hand on my shoulder. "But I want you to know that I never stopped watching. I never stopped caring. And when I saw what that woman was doing to you, I knew I couldn't stay hidden anymore. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There were too many feelings, too many years, too many unanswered questions." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I'm not asking for anything. But if you want me in your life, if you want your sons to know their grandfather, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I nodded. It was all I could manage. We stood there for a moment, 2 men in a parking lot trying to figure out how to be a family after 23 years of absence. "Dad," I said finally. "Thank you." He smiled. A real smile this time. Not the cold, calculated smile of a prosecutor, the smile of a father. "Nobody messes with my son," he said. "Nobody." Behind us I heard Vanessa's voice rising in pitch, arguing with the bailiff about something. Property, probably. Or maybe the car. It didn't matter anymore. I turned and walked toward my truck, My old F-150 with the dented fender and the check engine light that had been on for 3 months. The truck I'd bought used, paid off myself, and maintained with my own 2 hands. My father walked beside me. "You know," he said, "I could use a good mechanic. My Mercedes has been making a funny sound." I laughed. It felt strange laughing after everything that had happened, but it also felt right. "I'll take a look at it," I said. "Family discount." He clapped me on the back. "I was hoping you'd say that." The aftermath of the hearing unfolded over the next several months. Vanessa was charged with 3 counts of bank fraud, 2 counts of forgery, and 1 count of identity theft. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation and was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution, though everyone knew she'd never be able to cover even a fraction of what she'd stolen. Derek Simmons, the personal trainer, disappeared about a week after the hearing. Rumor was he'd moved to Florida. I didn't care enough to find out. The house sold for a little less than I'd hoped, but enough to pay off the remaining mortgage and most of the fraudulent loans. My father helped me negotiate with the banks, explaining that I was the victim of identity theft and had documentation to prove it. Most of them agreed to settle for reduced amounts. I moved into a smaller place, a 2-bedroom apartment about 10 minutes from the shop. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was cramped and the water pressure was lousy, but it was mine. And more importantly, it had a room for Tyler and Ethan. The boys were confused at first. They didn't understand why Mommy had to go away. They didn't understand why we were living in a new place. They didn't understand why Grandpa Thomas was suddenly part of our lives. But kids are resilient, more resilient than adults sometimes. Tyler, who was 9, started asking my father questions about his job, about the cases he'd worked on, about why he'd been gone for so long. My father answered honestly, in terms a 9-year-old could understand. He talked about bad people and good people and the hard choices you sometimes have to make to protect the ones you love. Ethan, who was 7, didn't ask questions. He just wanted to sit on his grandfather's lap and show him his drawings. My father, who had spent decades interrogating criminals and arguing cases before federal judges, turned out to be surprisingly good at admiring crayon pictures of dinosaurs. One night, about 3 months after the hearing, I was sitting on the couch after the boys had gone to bed. My father was in the kitchen, making coffee. The apartment was quiet. "Dad," I said. He came back with 2 mugs, handed me one, and sat down. "Yeah? All those years. All those years I thought you were a deadbeat, a drunk, a loser who couldn't handle being a father." He didn't flinch. "I know. Mom told me stories. She said you gambled away our savings. She said you chose booze over us. She said you were weak. She was trying to protect you," he said quietly. "If you'd known the truth, you might have tried to find me. And if you'd tried to find me, the wrong people might have found you first." I looked at him, at the lines on his face, at the gray in his hair, at the weight he carried, the weight of 2 decades of watching from a distance. "How did you do it?" I asked. "How did you watch me grow up, get married, have kids, and not say anything?" He was quiet for a long moment. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," he said finally. "Harder than any case, harder than any trial. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone, I wanted to be there. I wanted to call. I wanted to walk through your door and say, 'I'm here. I'm your father. I never stopped loving you.'" He set down his coffee. "But I couldn't, because if I had, they would have hurt you, and I couldn't live with that. So I stayed away. I watched from the shadows. And I waited for the day when it would be safe to come back. And that day was when Vanessa tried to destroy me." He nodded. "It's not the homecoming I wanted, but it's the one I got." I thought about that, about the strange, twisted path that had brought us to this moment, about the woman I'd married, who had seen me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited, about the father I'd hated, who had sacrificed everything to keep me safe. "I'm glad you came back," I said. He smiled. "So am I." A year later, I was standing in the parking lot of Bennett & Sons, watching the sun set behind the row of cars waiting to be repaired. A lot had changed. I'd hired 2 new mechanics. Business was up almost 30%. Tyler had joined the middle school robotics team. Ethan had started taking guitar lessons, and my father had moved to town, not into my apartment. He got a place of his own, a small condo about 15 minutes away, close enough to visit, far enough to give us space. He came over for dinner twice a week. He took the boys to baseball games. He started teaching Tyler about the law, not because he wanted him to be a lawyer, but because he wanted him to understand how the world worked. I never fully forgave him for the years he was gone. I'm not sure I ever will. Some wounds don't heal completely. They just become part of who you are. But I understood, and understanding was enough. Vanessa got out of prison after 14 months for good behavior. I heard she moved to another state. I didn't ask which one. The boys still ask about her sometimes. I tell them the truth in terms they can understand, that Mommy made some bad choices, that she's working on getting better, that they can see her when they're older if they want to. They usually change the subject after that. Kids are smart that way. One Sunday afternoon, I was in the garage, working on an old Mustang I was restoring. My father was sitting on a folding chair watching me work. The boys were inside watching cartoons. "Mark," he said. I looked up, wiping my hands on a rag. "I'm proud of you." I blinked. It wasn't something I'd heard often, not from him, not from anyone. For what? For not giving up, for not letting her break you, for standing there in that courtroom, alone, against all of them, and refusing to quit. I didn't know what to say. "You did all the work," I finally managed. He shook his head. "I showed up with documents and a plan. But you're the one who had to live through it. You're the one who had to keep going day after day when everything seemed hopeless. That takes a kind of strength that can't be taught. It has to be built, and you built it yourself." He stood up and walked over to where I was standing. "Your mother once told me that you'd never amount to anything, that you were too soft, too trusting, too naive. She said you'd be eaten alive by the world." He put his hand on my shoulder. "She was wrong. About a lot of things, but especially about you." I looked at him, at my father, at the man who had missed most of my life, but had shown up when it mattered most. "Thanks, Dad." He nodded. "Now show me what you're doing with that carburetor." "I've always wanted to learn how these things work." I laughed. "It's going to take a while." "I've got time," he said. "I've got plenty of time." And so we stood there, father and son, in a garage that smelled like motor oil and old leather, learning how to be a family again. Some stories end with revenge, some end with justice. Some end with a climactic moment where the villain gets what they deserve and the hero rides off into the sunset. My story didn't end like that. My story ended with a quiet Sunday in a garage, with an old car, with a father who came back. Vanessa called me a nobody. She said I was just a mechanic. She said I didn't understand how the world worked. But here's what I learned. The world doesn't belong to the people who talk the loudest. It belongs to the people who show up, who do the work, who build things with their hands and fix what's broken. I'm a mechanic, that's what I do. I fix things. And some things, it turns out, can be fixed. Pride doesn't pay the bills. Patience does. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you thought abandoned you turns out to be the one who saves you. That's not a fairy tale. That's just life. And life, I've learned, has a way of surprising you.